The knife pressed cold against Elena's throat before she even saw the man holding it. Barcelona's Gothic quarter had gone silent. No footsteps, no voices, just her ragged breathing and the metallic scrape of a blade. She'd walked straight into the wrong alley at the wrong time, chasing a sunset photo for her blog. Now a stranger's hand covered her mouth, and she understood with brutal clarity that some mistakes don't offer second chances. Then another voice cut through the darkness, low and absolute, "Let her go." The hand released. The knife disappeared, and when Elena turned to see who'd just saved her life, she found herself staring at someone far more dangerous than the man who'd tried to kill her. If you want to see how a single reckless moment in Barcelona changed everything, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. But Elena Martinez had exactly 3 rules for solo travel. Never flash money in crowded spaces, always trust her gut about people, and never ever walk down an unfamiliar alley after dark. She'd followed those rules religiously through 2 years of backpacking across Europe, building a modest following on her travel blog by sharing honest stories and unfiltered photos. She wasn't an influencer, not the kind with sponsorships and perfectly curated feeds. She was just a girl from Milwaukee who'd saved for 3 years to chase something bigger than the accounting job that had slowly been suffocating her. Barcelona was supposed to be her last stop before heading home. One final city before she returned to spreadsheets and fluorescent lights, and a life that felt like wearing someone else's clothes. She'd spent the afternoon wandering La Rambla, camera in hand, capturing the way golden light spilled across centuries-old architecture. The Gothic quarter had pulled her in with its narrow streets and hidden corners, each turn revealing something unexpected. A courtyard fountain, a musician playing cello beneath an archway, graffiti that looked like it belonged in a gallery. She'd been following the light. That's what she told herself later, trying to make sense of her own stupidity. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and rose, and she'd spotted what looked like the perfect shot, a narrow passageway where the dying light created dramatic shadows against ancient stone walls. Her photographer's brain had overridden every survival instinct. She'd stepped into the alley, raising her camera, already composing the frame in her mind. She didn't see the 3 men until she was too deep to turn back. They materialized from the shadows like they'd been waiting. 2 blocked the entrance behind her. The third stood ahead, his face obscured by the dim light, but his posture radiating the kind of casual menace that came from knowing he had all the power. Elena's stomach dropped. Her fingers tightened on her camera strap as her brain cycled through useless options. Scream, run, negotiate, fight. None of them would work. The alley was deserted. The main street felt miles away instead of meters. And these men knew exactly what they were doing. American? The one in front spoke English with a thick accent, taking a step toward her. Lost? Elena forced her voice steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Just taking photos. I'm leaving. Expensive camera. He nodded toward the Canon hanging from her neck. Maybe we keep it. For a protection fee. The 2 behind her moved closer. Elena's pulse roared in her ears. She thought about her mom, who'd begged her not to make this trip. About her sister, who'd called her irresponsible and reckless. About how right they'd both been. This was how people disappeared, making one careless choice, ignoring every warning their gut had screamed at them. Take it. She started to lift the camera strap over her head, her hands shaking. Just take it. Maybe the camera is not enough. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Pretty American girl, all alone, very careless. That's when the blade appeared. He didn't brandish it, didn't make a show of the threat, just held it casually at his side, letting her imagination do the rest. Elena's breath came in short, panicked bursts. She took a step back and hit a solid chest, one of the men behind her, an arm wrapped around her waist, pinning her arms. A hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream. Terror whited out rational thought. She thrashed, but the grip only tightened. The man with the knife stepped closer, his face coming into focus. Scarred, weathered, utterly indifferent to her fear. This was business to him, maybe not even important business. Then the voice came from somewhere beyond her line of sight, calm and cold as winter water. Let her go. Everything froze. The man holding her didn't release his grip, but his body went rigid. The one with the knife turned sharply toward the alley's entrance, and Elena saw something flicker across his face that looked almost like recognition or fear. "This is not your concern, Matteo." The knife wielder's voice had changed, lost its mocking edge. "Just street business. I said let her go. Let her." The hand covering Elena's mouth loosened, then dropped away entirely. The arm around her waist released. She stumbled forward, catching herself against the stone wall, her legs barely holding her weight. When she turned, she saw him for the first time. He stood at the alley's entrance, backlit by the last of the sunset, and even in silhouette, he commanded the entire space. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to drink the light. He didn't raise his voice, didn't draw a weapon or make threats. He just stood there, radiating the kind of authority that didn't require explanation. The three men exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then the one with the knife gave a barely perceptible nod and jerked his head toward the far end of the alley. They left without another word, melting back into the shadows like they'd never existed. Elena's knees gave out. She slid down the wall, her camera clattering against the stone, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and delayed shock. She couldn't catch her breath, couldn't process what had just happened. 1 second she'd been certain she was going to die, or worse, and the next she was sitting on filthy cobblestones while the man who'd saved her walked toward her with measured steps. He crouched down a few feet away, maintaining distance, and that's when she got her first clear look at him. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face that would have been handsome if it weren't so severe. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with the kind of stillness that suggested he was very, very good at violence, even if he wasn't currently employing it. "You're bleeding." His English was perfect, accent barely noticeable. He nodded toward her hands. Elena looked down. Her palms were scraped raw from catching herself against the wall, small cuts already welling with blood. She hadn't even felt it happen. "I'm fine." The words came out shaky. "Thank you. Thank you." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're American." "Is it that obvious? You walked into this alley with a $1,000 camera around your neck. Yes, it's obvious." There was no judgment in his tone, just statement of fact. "This neighborhood isn't safe after dark, especially not for tourists." "I figured that out." Elena tried to push herself to her feet, but her legs weren't cooperating yet. "Those men, did you know them?" Something flickered in his eyes, too quick to read. "Barcelona is a small city in some ways." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." He stood, offering her a hand. Elena hesitated, then took it. His grip was firm, controlled, and he pulled her up with effortless strength. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then released her the moment she found her balance. "Can you walk?" "I think so." She tested her weight, relieved when her knees held. "I'm staying near La Rambla. If I can I'll walk you." It wasn't an offer. He'd already started toward the alley's entrance, clearly expecting her to follow. Elena grabbed her camera and hurried after him, her journalist instincts kicking in despite the shock still coursing through her system. This man had appeared out of nowhere, sent 3 armed criminals running with nothing but his presence, and was now escorting her through the Gothic quarter like he owned the streets. Every rational cell in her body said to thank him and disappear. But the part of her that had traveled alone for 2 years, that had learned to read people in train stations and hostels, that part was screaming that this man was a story. They walked in silence through increasingly crowded streets. The deeper they moved into tourist territory, the more Elena's heart rate returned to normal. Around them, people laughed over late dinners. Street performers attracted small crowds. Life continued completely unaware of what had almost happened just blocks away. "You didn't tell me your name," Elena said finally. He glanced at her sideways. "Neither did you." "Elena Martinez." He didn't respond immediately, and she wondered if he'd ignore the implicit question. Then, "Matteo." "Just Matteo?" "It's enough." He stopped at a corner, nodding toward the well-lit street ahead. "Your hotel?" 2 blocks that way, yeah." Elena turned to face him fully. "Can I at least buy you a drink? Or coffee? As a thank you?" "That's not necessary." "I know it's not necessary. I'm offering anyway." She met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated by the cool assessment in his eyes. "You saved my life. The least I can do is, you don't owe me anything." His voice was flat. Go back to your hotel. Tomorrow, leave Barcelona. Find somewhere safer to point your camera. I'm not leaving yet. I have 3 more days here. Then stay in tourist areas. Don't take risks. He started to turn away. Wait. Elena didn't know why she reached out, why it mattered, but she caught his arm. He went very still, looking down at her hand on his sleeve. She dropped it quickly. Thank you. Really. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. Yes, you do. His eyes locked on hers, and for a moment she saw past the controlled exterior to something raw underneath. You know exactly what would have happened. That's why you should leave. Before she could respond, he walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd with the same ease he'd used to appear in that alley. Elena stood there, her heart pounding for entirely different reasons now, and wondered what the hell she'd just walked into. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the hand over her mouth, saw the knife, heard Mateo's voice cutting through her panic. By 3 a.m, she'd given up and sat at the tiny desk in her hotel room, laptop open, trying to write. Her blog post about Barcelona's architecture sat abandoned. Instead, she found herself typing out everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it. Who was Mateo? How had he made 3 armed men retreat without throwing a punch? Why had the knife wielder called him by name, spoken to him with that strange mix of deference and wariness? And why did someone who clearly held that kind of power walk away like saving her had been nothing more than an inconvenient errand? Elena pulled up Google, typed in Mateo Barcelona criminal, and immediately felt ridiculous. What was she expecting to find? His LinkedIn profile listing intimidating strangers as a core competency? She closed the laptop, frustrated with herself. She should be grateful to be alive and forget the whole thing ever happened, but she couldn't stop seeing his face, the controlled stillness, the darkness in his eyes that suggested he'd seen things that would give her nightmares. The way he'd looked at her in that final moment like he was trying to warn her about something he couldn't say out loud. The next morning, Elena did exactly what Mateo had told her not to do. She went back to the Gothic Quarter. She told herself it was about reclaiming the fear, not letting one bad experience ruin the neighborhood for her. She told herself she was being smart about it, going in daylight, staying on main streets, keeping her camera put away. She didn't tell herself the truth, which was that some part of her hoped she might see him again. The Gothic Quarter was a different place in morning light. Cafes spilled onto cobblestone streets. Tourists wandered with maps and guidebooks. The shadows that had seemed so menacing last night now looked merely atmospheric. Elena found a small plaza she'd missed before and settled at an outdoor table with coffee and a pastry, watching the city wake up around her. She didn't see Mateo, but she did see something else. The 3 men from last night walked past her table, deep in conversation, and didn't even glance her direction. Elena's breath caught. She pulled her sunglasses down, using them as cover while she watched. They met up with 2 others, then the group of 5 headed down a side street, moving with purpose. Every instinct Elena had developed over 2 years of solo travel told her to stay put, to finish her coffee, leave the Gothic Quarter, and spend her remaining days somewhere safe and boring. She'd already had her brush with danger. She'd been saved by a stranger. That was enough adventure for one trip. She dropped 15 euros on the table and followed them anyway. It wasn't hard to track 5 men through crowded streets. Elena kept a full block back, using tourist groups as cover, her hand ready on her phone in case she needed to run or call for help. They led her deeper into the less traveled parts of the neighborhood, away from the plaza and cafes, into narrow streets where washing hung from balconies overhead, and locals eyed her with suspicion. The men stopped at a nondescript building with a faded green door. 3 of them went inside. 2 stayed outside, taking up positions that clearly marked them as lookouts. Elena ducked into a doorway, her heart racing. This was insane. She was following criminals to what was obviously some kind of operation. And for what? A story? Curiosity? Some misguided attempt to understand the man who'd saved her? She pulled out her phone, pretended to be texting while actually taking photos of the building, the lookouts, the street. She had no idea what she'd do with these photos, but her journalist instincts had kicked in fully now. This was something. She didn't know what, but it was something. You're either very brave or very stupid. Elena's phone clattered to the cobblestones. She spun around to find Mateo standing less than 3 feet away, having appeared out of absolute nowhere. Again. Her hand flew to her chest as her heart tried to break through her ribs. Jesus Christ, do you practice sneaking up on people, or is that just a natural talent? He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the question, just looked at her with an expression somewhere between annoyance and disbelief. I told you to leave Barcelona. I don't take orders from strangers. Elena bent to grab her phone, checking it for damage. And I'm not doing anything wrong. This is a public street. This is not a public street. This is a private street in a private neighborhood, and you are not private. He glanced toward the green door where one of the lookouts had straightened, noticing them. Mateo made a subtle gesture, just a slight movement of his hand, and the man relaxed, returning his attention elsewhere. Come with me. Now. Why should I? Because in about 30 seconds, those men are going to realize the American tourist who wandered into their territory last night is now taking pictures of their business, and I won't be able to stop what happens next. His voice was low, urgent, and absolutely serious. Move. Elena's feet were walking before her brain caught up. Mateo set a quick pace, leading her through a series of turns that left her completely disoriented. They emerged on a wider street she didn't recognize, and he kept going until they reached a small park, mostly empty except for an elderly woman feeding pigeons. He turned on her, and for the first time she saw real emotion break through his controlled exterior. Anger. What are you doing? The question came out harsh. Do you have any idea how dangerous? I was just walking, taking photos. I'm a travel blogger, that's what I do. Don't lie to me. He stepped closer, and Elena had to fight the urge to step back. Not because she was afraid of him, she wasn't, which was probably its own kind of stupid, but because the intensity radiating off him was overwhelming. You followed those men from the plaza. I saw you. What were you thinking? I wanted to understand. The honesty came out before she could stop it. Last night, those men knew you. They were afraid of you, and I wanted to understand why. Something shifted in Mateo's expression. The anger didn't disappear, but it morphed into something else. Something that looked almost like resignation. You need to stop asking questions. I'm a blogger. Asking questions is literally my job. Your job is posting pretty pictures and restaurant recommendations, not investigating criminal networks. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was common knowledge, like he'd just confirmed exactly what Elena had suspected. So you admit those men are criminals? I admit nothing, but the denial was half-hearted. Elena, listen to me very carefully. You stumbled into something last night that you don't understand. I helped you because... He paused, seemed to reconsider his words. Because you didn't deserve what they were going to do. But that help has a limit. If you keep pushing, if you keep following, if you keep taking pictures of things you shouldn't be photographing, I won't be able to protect you. I didn't ask for your protection. No. You just asked for my name, my time, and apparently my patience. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the gesture. Go home, Elena. Whatever you think you're chasing here, it's not worth it. How do you know what it's worth to me? The question came out sharper than she intended. You don't know anything about me. I know you're alive because I happened to be in the right place last night. I know you're risking that life for reasons you probably can't even articulate. And I know that if you don't walk away from this right now, you're going to end up hurt in ways that can't be fixed. They stood there locked in a silent standoff, while pigeons scattered around the old woman's feet and traffic hummed in the distance. Elena knew he was right, knew she should thank him again, apologize for being reckless, and spend her last 3 days in Barcelona doing exactly what tourists were supposed to do. But something in his voice when he'd said, I won't be able to protect you, had sounded less like a warning and more like regret, like he knew something was already in motion that neither of them could stop. Tell me one thing, Elena said finally. Just one, and I'll walk away. Mateo's jaw tightened. What? Why did you help me last night? And don't say it was random chance. Those men knew you. They backed down immediately. You clearly have, influence, so why risk using it for a random tourist? For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, quietly, because you looked terrified. And you didn't deserve to be. It was such a simple answer, such a human answer, and it made absolutely no sense coming from a man who radiated danger like heat from a furnace. That's not enough, Elena said. There's more to it. That's all you're getting. He started to turn away, then stopped. There's a gallery on Caro dels Bonis Nu. Contemporary art, mostly local artists. It's safe, well lit, full of tourists. If you need something to photograph, start there. Is that where you'll be? No. His voice was final. You won't see me again. He walked away for the second time in 12 hours, and Elena stood in the park watching him disappear, knowing with absolute certainty that he was wrong. She would see him again, because whatever had started in that alley last night wasn't finished, not even close. Elena didn't go to the gallery. She went back to her hotel, opened her laptop, and started digging. The problem with researching criminal networks in a foreign city was that you couldn't exactly ask locals for directions. Search engines gave her tourist guides and restaurant recommendations. Barcelona's English-language news sites focused on football and city council debates. She tried variations of Matteo's name combined with crime-related keywords and got nothing useful, just articles about Italian restaurants and a Matteo who'd won a local chess tournament in 2019. She was going about this wrong. Elena sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. It was almost midnight, and she'd spent 6 hours chasing dead ends. Her flight home was in 2 days. Whatever truth she was looking for, she wasn't going to find it behind a computer screen. The next morning, she did something that would have made her mother have a panic attack. She went back to the building with the green door. The street looked different in daylight, but no less unwelcoming. No lookouts this time, just a few locals who eyed her with the specific suspicion reserved for outsiders who didn't belong. Elena walked past the building once, circled the block, then found a cafe with a view of the entrance and ordered coffee she didn't want. She waited 3 hours, long enough that the waiter started giving her pointed looks, long enough that she'd nearly convinced herself this was a waste of time. Then the green door opened and Matteo walked out. He wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, both wearing expensive suits that didn't quite hide the bulge of weapons underneath. They spoke rapidly in Spanish, Matteo listening with that same controlled stillness she'd seen before. He nodded once, said something brief, and the 2 men headed in opposite directions while Matteo started walking up the street. Elena threw money on the table and followed. She kept better distance this time, using the skills she'd learned photographing street life in dozens of cities. Stay in his peripheral vision, but not his direct line of sight. Move when he moves. Stop when he stops. Don't make it obvious. Matteo led her through the Gothic quarter like he knew every stone personally. He stopped at a small bar, went inside for 20 minutes, came out looking tense, met with a woman in designer clothes outside a boutique, had a conversation that involved a lot of hand gestures from her and complete stillness from him. Checked his phone constantly. Moved with the efficiency of someone who had too many places to be and not enough hours in the day. Elena documented all of it with her phone, trying to be discreet. This was insane. She knew it was insane, but something about Matteo had hooked into her brain and wouldn't let go. The contradiction of him, the violence and the gentleness, the power and the restraint, the way he'd saved her and then warned her away like he was protecting her from himself. She was so focused on keeping him in sight that she didn't notice the man following her until he was right behind her. "You are very bad at this." Elena spun around. The man was young, maybe 25, with a friendly face that didn't match the wariness in his eyes. He spoke English with a heavy accent, smiling like they were old friends running into each other. "I don't know what you mean," Elena said, her pulse jumping. "Following Matteo, taking pictures, being, subtle." He gestured at her phone, still clutched in her hand. "You're American, yes? Journalist?" "Blogger, travel blogger. You are just very interested in our city, I think." His smile didn't waver. "Maybe too interested in some parts. Matteo knows you are here." Elena's stomach dropped. "He does?" "Of course. You think he does not see you? He sees everything." The man glanced up the street where Matteo had stopped outside a restaurant, apparently taking a phone call. "He sends me to talk to you, to say, with respect, you should stop." "Or what?" "Or nothing. Is not threat. Is advice." The man's smile finally faded. "Matteo, he is complicated man, dangerous man sometimes, but also good man in his way. He does not want you hurt, so he asks you stop following, stop taking pictures, stop trying to understand things that are not for understanding." "Why doesn't he tell me himself?" "Because he thinks if he talks to you again, you will ask more questions. You seem like person who asks many questions." The observation was accurate enough to sting. Go home, American blogger. Write about the beach, the food, the buildings, not about things in shadows. The man walked away before Elena could respond, heading in the opposite direction from Matteo, disappearing into the afternoon crowd. Elena stood there, her heart hammering, phone still recording in her hand. She looked up the street and found Matteo watching her. Even from a distance, she could see his expression. Not angry this time, something worse. Disappointed. He ended his phone call and walked toward her with deliberate slowness, giving her every opportunity to leave. Elena didn't move. Couldn't move. They'd crossed some invisible line, and there was no going back now. "You're persistent," Matteo said when he reached her. "I'll give you that. Your friend already delivered the message." "Carlos is not my friend. He works for me." Matteo glanced around, clearly uncomfortable having this conversation in public. "There's a park 2 blocks from here. We should talk there." "Is that safe?" "Safer than here." He started walking, not checking to see if she followed. The park was small, mostly empty except for a couple teenagers sharing headphones on a bench. Matteo led her to a fountain in the center, far enough from anyone to have privacy. He didn't sit, just stood looking at the water like it held answers he needed. "Why are you still here?" he asked finally. "In Barcelona? I told you my flight's not until... Why are you still following me?" He turned to face her, and the frustration in his voice was undeniable. "What do you want, Elena? An interview? A story? Is that what this is about?" "I don't know what this is about." The honesty surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. I can't stop thinking about that alley, about you, about why you helped me." "I already told you why. You gave me a reason, not the reason." Elena sat on the fountain's edge, her legs suddenly tired from hours of walking. "Those men last night, they worked for you, didn't they?" Matteo's silence was answer enough. "And the building with the green door, the people you've been meeting all morning, this is all part of something illegal." She waited for him to deny it. He didn't. "So why help a random tourist? Why risk drawing attention to yourself? It doesn't make sense unless what? Unless you're not as dangerous as everyone seems to think you are." Matteo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You have no idea what I am." "Then tell me." "Why would I do that?" "Because I think you want to." The words came from somewhere deep, some instinct Elena didn't know she had. "I think you're tired of whatever this is. I think when you saw me in that alley, you saw a way out, even if it was just for a moment. Someone who didn't know you, didn't fear you, didn't want anything from you except to be saved." The expression on Matteo's face shifted through several emotions too quickly to track. Then he sat down next to her, maintaining careful distance, and stared at the fountain. "My father built an empire in this city," he said quietly. "Not legal, not pretty, but effective. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited it. The businesses, the territory, the debts, the enemies, all of it. I was 28 years old and suddenly responsible for 300 people who depended on me to keep them employed, protected, alive." Elena waited, barely breathing, afraid any sound would make him stop. "I didn't want it. I'd left Barcelona years before, was working in London for a tech company, regular job, regular life. Then my father had a heart attack and everything changed. His lieutenants were already fighting over territory before his body was cold. If I didn't come back, didn't take control, everything would have collapsed. People would have died." He paused. "More people than usual, I mean. You could have walked away. Could I?" He finally looked at her. "My father built this knowing I'd have no choice. He made sure every legitimate asset was tied to the illegal ones. Made sure my mother's security depended on the network staying intact. Made sure walking away would mean watching everything burn, including people I cared about. That's not fair." "No, it's not." Matteo's voice held decades of resentment compressed into 2 words. "But fair doesn't matter in this world. Only power matters. Control. Making sure you're scarier than everyone trying to take what you have." "Is that why those men ran when you told them to? In the alley?" "Those men work for Garcia, who controls the port district. We have an arrangement. They know that touching someone under my protection would violate that arrangement, and Garcia knows I don't make empty threats." He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was explaining business logistics. "When I told them to let you go, they understood it wasn't a suggestion." Elena's brain was struggling to reconcile the man sitting next to her, talking about criminal empires and territorial arrangements, with the man who'd saved her because she looked terrified. "You didn't answer my question," she said. "Why help me?" Matteo was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I'm tired. Tired of being the person people fear. Tired of making decisions about who lives and who gets hurt and how much violence is acceptable to maintain peace. And when I saw you in that alley, terrified but trying to negotiate, trying to be brave even though you were shaking," he stopped. "You reminded me that not everyone lives like this, that somewhere people still get scared of normal things, still make stupid decisions because they're chasing light for a photograph." That's specific. "I looked at your blog last night. You're good. The photos, the writing, you make places feel real, not just tourist destinations." He glanced at her. "Made me remember what it's like to see the world without calculating risk and profit margin." Elena didn't know what to say to that. They sat in silence while the fountain burbled and teenagers laughed, and the city moved around them completely unaware of the conversation happening in its midst. "I should go," Matteo said finally, standing, "and you should stop following me, please. I meant what I said. I can't protect you if you keep pushing into places you don't belong." "What if I don't want your protection?" "Then you're even more foolish than I thought." But his voice was soft, almost fond. "Go home, Elena Martinez. Write about Barcelona. Make it beautiful. Forget you ever met me." He started to walk away, and Elena felt panic rise in her chest. This felt like an ending, and she wasn't ready for it to end. "Wait," she called out. Would you let me buy you dinner? Just dinner. No questions about business, no following, just dinner, as a thank you." Matteo stopped, his back to her. She watched tension run through his shoulders, watched him consider and reject the idea 6 times in the span of seconds. Then he turned around. "One dinner," he said, "and then you stop. You leave Barcelona, go back to your life, and forget this week ever happened." "One dinner," Elena agreed, even though they both knew she was lying. They met that night at a restaurant tucked into a quiet corner of Elborn, the kind of place tourists never found. Matteo was already there when Elena arrived, sitting at a table in the back with sight lines to both entrances. He stood when he saw her, and she was struck again by how different he looked from anyone she'd ever known. Dangerous and damaged, and somehow still magnetic. "You came," he said, like he'd half expected her to change her mind. "You thought I wouldn't? I thought you'd come to your senses." He pulled out her chair, the gesture oddly formal. "I'm glad you didn't." The admission hung between them, while Elena sat and Matteo returned to his seat. A waiter appeared immediately, clearly knew Matteo, clearly knew to be attentive. Matteo ordered in rapid Spanish, then looked at Elena. "You trust me to choose?" "Should I?" "Probably not, but the food here is excellent, and the chef owes me a favor." "Do a lot of people owe you favors?" "That's a business question." We agreed no business questions. But he was almost smiling, and Elena felt something warm unfold in her chest. The food, when it came, was incredible. Small plates of things Elena couldn't identify, but tasted like they'd been designed specifically to make her happy. Matteo ate sparingly, drinking wine and watching her react to each new dish with something that might have been amusement. "You don't like it?" Elena asked, gesturing at his barely touched plate. "I'm not very hungry, but I like watching you discover things." He topped off her wine. "Tell me about Milwaukee. Why did you leave?" "Because it was killing me slowly." The wine had loosened her tongue. Not literally, obviously, but that slow death of routine. Same job, same apartment, same coffee shop every morning. I'd wake up and wonder if this was it, if I'd already lived the most interesting parts of my life and everything from here was just maintenance. "So you ran away." "I prefer strategically relocated for personal growth." Elena smiled. "But yeah, I ran away. Saved every penny for 3 years, quit my job, and bought a one-way ticket to London. Figured I'd backpack until the money ran out, then figure out what came next. And now? Now the money's almost gone, and I still don't know what comes next. But at least I have 2 years of stories." She paused. "What about you? You said you worked in London before all this. Did you ever think about going back?" "Every day." The answer came quick, honest. "But thinking about it and actually doing it are different things. I have responsibilities here, people who depend on me." People who work for you, you mean? Some of them, yes. But also my mother, my younger sister, families who've been with my father's organization for decades. If I walk away, what happens to them? He stared at his wine glass. That's the trap, you see. My father built it perfectly, made sure I'd always choose their safety over my freedom. That's not fair to you. Life rarely is. Matteo looked up, and in the candlelight, Elena could see exhaustion in his eyes. But we make choices with what we're given. I chose to come back, chose to take control, chose to be the person my father needed me to be. Those consequences are mine to carry. What if you chose differently now? It's too late for different choices. Is it? Elena leaned forward. You're what, 33? You have decades ahead of you. You could walk away, start over somewhere else. People do it all the time. People like you, maybe. Not people like me. His voice went hard. You don't understand what I've done, Elena. The choices I've made to keep control. I'm not some misunderstood anti-hero waiting for redemption. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, made decisions that keep me awake at 3 a.m. wondering if I'm any better than my father. Are you? The question clearly caught him off guard. What? Are you better than your father? You said he built this empire. Did he ever stop to question it? Did he ever save a random tourist because she looked terrified? Elena held his gaze. You're carrying his legacy, but you're not him. That has to count for something. Matteo looked at her like she was speaking a language he'd forgotten. Then he signaled for the check, his walls slamming back into place. I should take you back to your hotel. Did I say something wrong? No. You said something right, and that's worse. He stood, leaving money on the table without checking the bill. Come on. They walked through Barcelona's narrow streets in heavy silence. Elena wanted to apologize, but didn't know what for. For pushing too hard, probably. For trying to fix something that wasn't hers to fix. For seeing potential in a man who'd spent years convinced he was beyond saving. When they reached her hotel, Matteo stopped a respectful distance from the entrance. Thank you for dinner. You paid. Thank you for the company, then. He shoved his hands in his pockets, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. Elena, I need you to understand something. This, whatever this is, it can't continue. You go home tomorrow, and we don't see each other again. That's how this has to end. Why? Because I'm dangerous. Not in some romantic, misunderstood way. Actually dangerous. People around me get hurt. It's not if, it's when. His voice was rough. And I've done enough damage in my life. I don't need to add you to that list. Elena stepped closer, watching his eyes widen slightly. What if I'm willing to take that risk? You don't know what you're risking. Then tell me. Stop protecting me from information and let me make my own choices. She was close enough now to see his pulse jumping in his throat. You said you're tired of being the person people fear, so stop being that person, at least with me. It's not that simple. Why not? Because… Matteo stopped, frustration and something else warring on his face. Because I haven't wanted something for myself in 5 years. Everything I do is for the organization, for control, for maintaining the empire my father built. And then you show up with your camera and your questions and your ridiculous optimism, and suddenly I want. And that's dangerous, Elena, for both of us. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. I changed my flight, she said quietly. I'm staying another week. Elena, I know it's stupid. I know you're right about the danger, but I'm staying anyway. She met his eyes. And if you want to see me again, you know where to find me. She walked into the hotel before he could respond, before her courage failed, before the practical part of her brain could point out all the reasons this was insane. She made it to her room, closed the door, and leaned against it with her heart racing and her hands shaking. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. Placa de Sant Felipe Neri. Tomorrow, noon. Elena stared at the text, knowing she should ignore it, knowing she should check out of this hotel and get on the first plane home. Instead, she typed back, I'll be there. The next morning, Elena woke to sun streaming through her window and doubt screaming in her brain. What was she doing? She'd extended her trip and was now meeting a self-admitted criminal in some random plaza because of what? A connection? A feeling? The memory of how he'd looked at her outside the hotel like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. She'd built a life on being practical, on making safe choices, on not taking risks that could end in disaster. And here she was, throwing all of that away for a man she'd known for 3 days. But she got dressed anyway. Put on the nicest clothes she'd packed. A simple dress, nothing fancy, but something that made her feel less like a backpacker and more like someone worth meeting in a plaza at noon. She arrived 15 minutes early and found Plaza de Sant Felipe Neri tucked away in the Gothic quarter, a small square with a Baroque church and pockmarked walls that spoke of violence from wars long past. Matteo was already there, sitting on the church steps in jeans and a dark shirt, looking like he belonged to the shadows pooling in the corners. He stood when he saw her. "You came," he said. "You thought I wouldn't?" "I hoped you wouldn't." But his eyes said different. "This is a mistake, Elena." "Probably." She sat on the steps, and after a moment he joined her. "So why did you text me?" "Because I'm selfish and weak, and apparently incapable of doing the right thing where you're concerned." He wasn't looking at her, just staring at the pockmarked walls. "You see those marks? From the Civil War. This plaza saw bombing, death, children killed, and people rebuilt anyway, covered the scars with plaster, and kept living. Is this supposed to be a metaphor?" "Maybe. I'm not good at this." He finally turned to face her. "I don't know how to be around someone who doesn't want something from me, who isn't calculating angles or looking for leverage. You're just here, being honest, asking questions. And I don't know what to do with that. You could try being honest back." "I'm trying." He ran a hand through his hair. "What do you want from me, Elena?" "Really? I don't know yet." She touched his hand, felt him go still at the contact. "But I'd like to find out." Matteo looked at their hands, hers pale against his darker skin, her fingers smaller and unmarked by the violence his had known. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "If we do this, if I let you in, it won't be safe. There are people who would hurt you just to hurt me, rivals who would see you as weakness. And I can protect you to a point, but not if you're stubborn or reckless or refuse to listen when I say something's dangerous. I can be careful. You followed me through the Gothic quarter, taking pictures on your phone. You're not careful, you're fearless, and that's going to get you killed." But his hand had turned, was now holding hers properly. "Promise me you'll listen. When I say run, you run. When I say stay away, you stay away, even if you don't understand why." "I promise." The lie came easily, and from the look on his face, Matteo knew it was a lie. But he didn't call her on it. Instead, he stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on, if you're staying in Barcelona another week, I should show you the parts tourists never see." "Is that safe?" "Probably not. But safety seems to be something we've both stopped prioritizing." He kept holding her hand as they walked out of the plaza, and Elena felt the world shift around them. This was real now. Whatever this was, it had moved from chance encounter to conscious choice, from coincidence to consequence. And despite every warning her rational mind was screaming, Elena felt more alive than she had in years. Matteo took her to places that didn't exist on any tourist map. A rooftop garden hidden behind a crumbling apartment building where elderly men played dominoes and argued about football. A tiny bookstore run by a woman who called Matteo mijo and kissed both his cheeks like he was family. A street market that only operated on Thursdays where vendors sold everything from stolen electronics to homemade empanadas, and everyone who saw Matteo either nodded respectfully or looked away quickly. Elena watched it all with growing fascination. This was a different Barcelona, one that operated on unspoken rules and complicated loyalties, and Matteo moved through it like he'd been born to it, which she supposed he had been. "The woman at the bookstore," Elena said as they walked through narrow streets. "She seemed to really care about you." "Rosa practically raised me. My mother worked 2 jobs after my father went to prison the first time. Rosa would let me hide in her store, bring me food, make sure I did my homework." Matteo's voice went soft. "When my father got out and started building his empire, Rosa was one of the only people who told him he was making a mistake. He didn't listen." "Does she know what you do now?" "She knows, doesn't approve, still feeds me when I visit." He glanced at Elena. "She asked about you, by the way." "What did you tell her?" That you're American, stubborn, and apparently immune to good advice. Sounds about right. Elena bumped his shoulder with hers, pleased when he didn't pull away. Where are we going? Somewhere I shouldn't take you, but I want you to see it anyway. They climbed narrow stairs built into a hillside, emerging onto a viewpoint that overlooked the entire city. Barcelona spread out below them in all directions, the geometric blocks of the Example, the spires of the Sagrada Familia, the Mediterranean glittering in the distance. It was breathtaking. I come here when I need to think, Matteo said, sitting on a low wall. Reminds me there's more to the city than the corners I control. Elena sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. How much do you control? More than I want, less than people think. He pulled out his phone, silenced it without looking at the screen. My father had the port, half the Gothic Quarter, and pieces of 3 other neighborhoods. I've been trying to consolidate, reduce our footprint. Every business we close is one less thing that can go wrong. That doesn't sound like empire building. It's not. It's damage control. Matteo stared at the city below. You asked if I was better than my father. The truth is, I don't know. He built something out of nothing, provided for hundreds of families, created order and chaos. But he also destroyed lives, made enemies, taught his son that violence was just another business tool. So which part do I inherit? The provider or the predator? Maybe both, maybe neither. Elena drew her knees up, resting her chin on them. Maybe you're just Matteo trying to figure out who that is. Matteo doesn't exist anymore. He died when I came back to Barcelona. I don't believe that. You should. But he said it without conviction, like he was trying to convince himself more than her. They sat in silence for a while, watching the city wake up to another day. Elena wanted to take pictures, but didn't. This felt too private, too real. Some moments weren't meant to be documented. Tell me something true, Matteo said finally. Something you've never told anyone. Elena considered lying, deflecting, keeping her walls up the way he kept his. But something about this moment, the height, the isolation, the way he'd opened up to her, demanded honesty. I'm terrified I wasted my life, she said quietly. 27 years old, no career, no plan, running out of money in a foreign country. Everyone back home thinks I'm brave, living this adventure, but most days I just feel lost, like I traded one kind of emptiness for another. That's not true. How would you know? Because I've read your blog. Every post. He looked embarrassed admitting it. You write about places like you're discovering pieces of yourself in them. That's not emptiness. That's search. And what happens when the search ends and I still haven't found anything? Then you keep searching, or you realize what you were looking for was the search itself. Matteo's phone buzzed again. This time he looked at it, frowned. I need to handle something, work thing. Should I go? Not yet. He made a quick call, speaking Spanish too rapid for Elena to follow. When he hung up, his expression had shifted into something harder. I need to meet someone. It's not dangerous, just business, but you can't come with me. Okay. He looked surprised. Just okay? No argument? You asked me to trust you, so I'm trusting you. Elena stood, brushing off her dress. How long? 2 hours, maybe 3. I can have Carlos take you back to your hotel, or I'll explore, take pictures, tourist stuff. She smiled at his skeptical expression. I promise I won't follow you or investigate your business dealings. Scout's honor. Were you actually a scout? No, but the sentiment stands. Matteo stood, hesitated, then pulled her into a brief, tight hug. He smelled like coffee and something clean she couldn't identify. Stay in public places, keep your phone on. If anything feels wrong, call me immediately. You gave me your number? Check your phone. Elena pulled it out and found a new contact labeled simply M. The protectiveness in the gesture made something warm bloom in her chest. I'll be careful, she promised. No, you won't. But please try anyway. He left reluctantly, looking back twice before disappearing down the stairs. Elena waited until she was sure he was gone, then pulled out her camera and started taking pictures of the city below. The light was perfect, catching Barcelona in that golden hour photographers dream about. She spent an hour at the viewpoint before heading back down, intending to find coffee and maybe that gallery Matteo had mentioned days ago. She was halfway down the stairs when her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Elena Martinez? The voice was male, Spanish accent, unfamiliar. The American blogger? Every instinct Elena had developed over 2 years of solo travel started screaming. Who is this? A friend. I have information about Mateo Reyes you might find interesting. I'm not interested. I think you are. You've been spending a lot of time with him, yes? Taking pictures, asking questions. Maybe you should know who you're really with. Elena's mouth went dry. How do you know? Meet me. 1 hour. Placa Real. Come alone or don't come at all. The line went dead. Elena stood on the stairs, phone clutched in her hand, mind racing. This was obviously a trap, obviously dangerous. She should call Mateo immediately, tell him what happened, let him handle it. That's what he'd told her to do if anything felt wrong. But curiosity warred with caution. What information could this stranger have? Why reach out to her specifically, and why did part of her want to know, even knowing it was reckless? She looked at her phone, at the contact labeled M, and made a choice she knew she'd probably regret. Plaza Real was crowded with tourists, street performers, and locals enjoying late lunch at outdoor cafes. Elena arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a table with clear sightlines, ordering coffee she didn't drink. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like everyone was watching her even though she knew rationally that wasn't true. A man approached her table exactly on time. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of face that was handsome in a cold, calculated way. He sat down without asking, signaling for the waiter with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. Miss Martinez, thank you for coming. I haven't decided if that was smart yet. Elena kept her hands visible on the table, fighting the urge to fidget. You have information about Mateo? Straight to business. I admire that. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. My name is Diego Vargas. I run operations in the Port District. Mateo and I have a business relationship that has become, shall we say, complicated. Garcia. Mateo had mentioned him, the man who controlled the port, who'd had some arrangement with Mateo. The man whose employees had tried to rob her in that alley. Those were your men, Elena said. The ones who attacked me. An unfortunate misunderstanding. They didn't know you were under Mateo's protection. If they had, they never would have touched you. Diego leaned back, completely relaxed. But that's precisely what I wanted to discuss. Mateo's protection. Do you understand what that means? He keeps me safe. He makes you a target. Diego's voice was gentle, almost kind. You think those men in the alley were random criminals? They work for me, yes, but they were following orders. Orders to see who Mateo was spending time with, who might be important to him. And now you are on that list. Elena's coffee churned in her stomach. Why are you telling me this? Because Mateo is making mistakes, letting personal feelings interfere with business, getting distracted by an American tourist when he should be focused on maintaining the balance we've all worked very hard to achieve. Diego's eyes were flat, emotionless. I like Mateo, respect him even. But he's become unpredictable. And unpredictability is dangerous in our line of work. What do you want from me? I want you to leave Barcelona, today, now. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside is a plane ticket to London, first class, departing in 4 hours. Also 5,000 euros to help you settle wherever you decide to go next. All I ask in return is that you disappear from Mateo's life without explanation. Elena stared at the envelope like it was a snake. You're paying me to leave? I'm paying you to stay alive. And to keep Mateo focused. Diego's voice hardened slightly. You don't understand what you've stumbled into. Mateo controls significant territory in this city, but that control is contested. Every day people are looking for weakness. And you, Miss Martinez, are weakness. If certain people decide you're valuable enough, they will take you, hurt you, use you to force Mateo into decisions that benefit them. Mateo would protect me. He would try. And in trying, he would make choices that would get people killed. His people, my people, maybe you. Is that what you want? To be responsible for violence because you couldn't resist playing at being Bonnie to his Clyde? The accusation stung because it was partially true. Elena had been romanticizing this, treating it like some adventure instead of recognizing the real danger. But Diego's motivations weren't pure either. You don't care about my safety, Elena said. You care about control, about making sure Mateo stays predictable and profitable. I care about both. They're not mutually exclusive. Diego stood, leaving the envelope on the table. The offer expires in 4 hours. Take it or don't, but understand that if you stay, you're choosing consequences you can't predict. And Mateo won't be able to save you from all of them. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd with practiced ease. Elena sat frozen, staring at the envelope, her mind spinning. She should call Mateo, tell him about this meeting, about Diego's threat, about the ticket and the money and the warning. Instead, she picked up the envelope and tucked it into her bag. She needed to think. Elena walked for hours, no destination in mind, just moving through Barcelona's streets, while her thoughts chased each other in circles. Diego was right about some things. She was out of her depth. Being with Mateo did make her a target, and she was being reckless, foolish, naive about the reality of what his life actually meant. But Diego was also trying to manipulate her, using fear to control the situation, to remove what he saw as a distraction. And something about his approach felt off. If he really just wanted her gone, why offer money? Why not simply threaten her directly? Her phone rang. Mateo. Hey, she answered, trying to sound normal. Where are you? His voice was tense. I've been back at the viewpoint for 20 minutes. You said you'd stay in public places. I am in public, just walking, thinking. About what? About plane tickets and warnings and whether caring about you is going to get me killed, Elena thought. Out loud she said, about how long I want to stay in Barcelona. Silence on the other end. Then, you're thinking about leaving. I'm thinking about a lot of things. Where are you? Exactly. The command in his voice was undeniable. Somewhere in Elborn, I think. Near that restaurant where we had dinner. Elena stopped walking, suddenly exhausted. Mateo, can we talk? Actually talk? Yes. Stay there. I'm coming to you. He found her 15 minutes later, appearing from a side street like he'd known exactly where she'd be. One look at her face and his expression shifted from concerned to dangerous. What happened? I got a phone call. And then I did something stupid. Elena pulled the envelope from her bag and handed it to him. Diego Vargas wanted to meet. I went. Mateo's face went completely blank as he opened the envelope, saw the ticket and cash. When he looked up, his eyes were cold in a way Elena had never seen. He threatened you. Not exactly. He offered me money to leave. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm afternoon. Said I was making you unpredictable. That being with me put me in danger and put you in a position where you might make bad decisions. And what did you say? I didn't say anything. He left before I could respond. Elena met his eyes. Is he right? Am I putting you in danger? You're putting yourself in danger. There's a difference. Mateo pocketed the envelope, his jaw tight. How long ago did you meet him? 2 hours, maybe. Why? Because I need to handle this. Now. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke rapid, angry Spanish. Then to Elena. Carlos is coming to take you back to your hotel. You're going to pack, and you're going to stay in your room until I come get you. Mateo. This isn't negotiable, Elena. Diego crossed a line. He doesn't get to approach you, doesn't get to offer you money, doesn't get to use you as leverage. The fury in his voice was barely controlled. I should have seen this coming, should have protected you better. I made the choice to meet him. Because he manipulated you, used your curiosity against you. Mateo's expression softened slightly. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at myself for putting you in this position. Carlos arrived in a black sedan, and Mateo opened the back door for her. Elena hesitated. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment Diego thought he could use you. I'm going to remind him why that was a mistake. Mateo's voice was ice. Go, please. I'll come to your hotel tonight, and we'll figure out what happens next. Elena got in the car, watching through the window as Mateo spoke briefly to Carlos in Spanish. Then they were moving, pulling into traffic, and she lost sight of him. Carlos drove in silence, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. Elena wanted to ask questions but didn't know where to start. At her hotel, he walked her to her room, checked it thoroughly, then stationed himself in the hallway. I wait here until Mateo comes, he said when Elena protested. Is not discussion. So Elena locked herself in her room and tried not to think about what Mateo might be doing. Tried not to imagine confrontations or violence or consequences she'd set in motion by being stupid enough to meet Diego. She paced, checked her phone obsessively, started packing, and then stopped because she didn't know if she was staying or leaving or what the hell she was even doing anymore. Hours passed. Afternoon turned to evening, turned to night. Elena ordered room service she couldn't eat, took a shower that didn't calm her nerves, and finally collapsed on the bed fully clothed, exhausted but unable to sleep. At 11, someone knocked. Elena opened the door to find Mateo standing there, still wearing the same clothes from earlier but looking somehow both wired and exhausted. Carlos was gone. "Can I come in?" Elena stepped aside and Mateo entered, moving immediately to the window to check the street below before finally turning to face her. "Diego won't bother you again." "What did you do?" "Renegotiated our arrangement. Made it clear that certain approaches were unacceptable." His voice was carefully neutral. "He understands now." "Did you hurt him?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." Elena sat on the bed, her legs suddenly unsteady. "It matters to me." Mateo was quiet for a long moment. Then, "No, I didn't hurt him. But I made certain promises about what would happen if he ever contacted you again. Promises I'm fully prepared to keep." Relief and something else flooded through Elena. She patted the bed next to her, and after hesitating, Mateo sat, close enough that she could feel the tension radiating off him. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I knew getting involved with you was dangerous. Knew it would paint a target on you. But I was selfish. Wanted something for myself for once. And now you're caught in the middle of power games you never asked to be part of. I chose this. Chose to stay. Chose to spend time with you. Chose to ignore every warning sign." Elena took his hand, felt him grip it tightly. "Diego was right about one thing, though. I didn't understand what I was getting into. Not really. And now? Now I'm terrified, but also..." She struggled to find the words. "Also more certain that I want to know you. The real you, not the version everyone else sees. Is that insane?" "Completely." But Mateo was looking at her with something raw in his eyes. "You should get on that plane. Leave Barcelona. Leave me. Go back to your life where the biggest danger is a delayed flight or bad hotel Wi-Fi. Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. What's safe matters." "That's not an answer." Mateo stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "What I want is to be someone different. Someone who deserves you, who can take you to dinner without calculating exit routes and potential threats. Someone whose past doesn't include things that would horrify you if you knew the details." He stopped in front of her. "But I'm not that person, and pretending otherwise is dangerous for both of us." Elena stood too, closing the distance between them. "Tell me to leave. If that's really what you want, tell me directly. Tell me you don't want me here, and I'll go." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because it would be a lie." His voice cracked slightly. "Because you're the first real thing I've felt in 5 years. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it's like to want something beyond survival and control. And that's terrifying, Elena. You terrify me." She reached up, touching his face, feeling him lean into her palm like a man starved for gentle contact. "You terrify me too, but I'm still here." "You shouldn't be." "Probably not." She smiled slightly. "But when have I ever done what I should?" Mateo kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and honest and full of all the things neither of them had said. Elena kissed him back, pouring 2 years of loneliness and uncertainty, and searching into this moment, this connection with someone who understood what it meant to be lost. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Mateo rested his forehead against hers. "If you stay, things will get complicated. Diego backed down this time, but there are others who won't. People who'll see you as opportunity or weakness or collateral damage." His hands framed her face. "I can protect you to a point, but I can't guarantee your safety. And I need you to understand that before you make any decisions." "I understand." "Do you?" "Really?" He pulled back to look at her. "Because once you're in, truly in, there's no casual exit. My world doesn't work that way." "Then teach me how it works. Show me what I need to know to navigate it." Elena's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "I'm not asking for guarantees or perfect safety. I'm asking for honesty and a chance to see where this goes. Matteo searched her face for a long moment, looking for doubt or hesitation. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him because he pulled her close again, holding her like she was something precious he was afraid to break. You're going to regret this, he murmured into her hair. Maybe, but it'll be my regret to own. They stood like that for a while. Two people who'd stumbled into each other's lives at exactly the wrong time, finding something that felt exactly right. Outside, Barcelona continued its endless rhythm, unaware and uncaring that somewhere in a hotel room, two lives had just irrevocably intertwined. Elena's phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again, insistent. Matteo released her so she could check it. Unknown number. A photo message. Elena opened it and felt ice flood her veins. It was a picture of her and Matteo on the rooftop earlier that day, clearly taken with a telephoto lens. Below it, a message. Pretty couple. Would be a shame if something happened. Matteo saw her expression and took the phone. His face went absolutely cold. Get your things. You're not staying here tonight. Matteo, who, I don't know yet, but we're leaving, now. He was already moving, grabbing her laptop and charger, pulling her suitcase from the closet. Elena's hand shook as she threw clothes into the bag, not bothering to fold anything. The warmth from moments ago had evaporated, replaced by a fear that tasted like metal. This was real, not romantic or exciting or adventurous. Real danger, real threats, real consequences for choosing to stay. And as Matteo hustled her out of the hotel through a service entrance, as she climbed into a car with tinted windows driven by someone she'd never met, as Barcelona's streets blurred past while Matteo made urgent phone calls in Spanish, Elena realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't a tourist anymore. She wasn't even really an outsider. She was in it now. Whatever came next, there was no going back. The safe house was an apartment in Gracia, a neighborhood Elena had never visited. Third floor, unmarked door, windows that overlooked a quiet courtyard. Matteo swept through it efficiently, checking rooms and locks while Elena stood in the small living room clutching her suitcase and trying to process what was happening. You'll stay here tonight, Matteo said, returning from his inspection. It's clean, untraceable. No one outside my inner circle knows about this place. Who sent that photo? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. He was already on his phone again, typing rapidly. Carlos is coordinating with my people. We'll have answers by morning. And then what? Matteo finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Elena saw guilt written across his face. And then we figure out how to keep you alive. The bluntness of it hit like a slap. Elena sat down hard on the worn couch, her legs giving out. This was real. Someone had photographed them, threatened them, and now she was hiding in a safe house while Matteo tried to identify whoever wanted to hurt her. I should leave, she said quietly. Get on the first plane out tomorrow. This is insane. Yes. Matteo sat beside her, close but not touching. You should. I'll arrange it. First class to anywhere you want, security escort to the airport, money to help you resettle. Just say the word. Elena waited for him to add something, to ask her to stay, to tell her he wanted her there despite the danger. He didn't, just sat waiting for her decision, his face carefully neutral. Is that what you want? She asked. What I want is irrelevant. Stop saying that. Frustration sharpened her voice. Stop hiding behind what's safe or logical or right. I'm asking what you actually want, Matteo. Just once. Give me a straight answer. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, I want you to stay. I want to wake up tomorrow and take you to breakfast at this place near the market that makes perfect cortados. I want to show you more of the city, the real Barcelona, not the tourist version. I want to fall asleep with you in my arms and not think about threats or rivals or consequences. His voice dropped. But wanting those things doesn't make them possible or safe. What if I'm willing to accept unsafe? You shouldn't have to. You walked into an alley 5 days ago and your biggest concern was getting robbed. Now you're in a safe house because someone's threatening your life. That's on me. My world, my enemies, my fault. Elena turned to face him fully. Did it occur to you that maybe I get to decide what risks I take? That maybe I'm tired of playing it safe, of always choosing the careful option? She reached for his hand. I spent 2 years traveling alone because I was suffocating in a life that was all safety and no meaning. And yes, this is terrifying, but it's also real. You're real, and I'm not ready to walk away from that. Elena, I'm staying. She said it firmly, before fear could change her mind. At least for now. At least until we know who sent that photo and what they want. Mateo's hand tightened on hers. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. He pulled her close, and she felt him trembling slightly. This man who controlled criminal operations and made dangerous men back down was shaking because she'd chosen to stay. The vulnerability in that gesture made Elena's chest ache. I don't know how to do this, Mateo said into her hair. How to be with someone and keep them safe. Every relationship I've had since taking over has been transactional or temporary. I don't know how to care about someone without it becoming a weapon someone can use against me. Then we figure it out together. Elena pulled back to look at him. I'm not asking for perfect or easy, just honest. Honest I can do. He brushed hair from her face, his touch gentle. I'm terrified. Of whoever sent that photo, yes, but more of how much I already care about you. 5 days, Elena. I've known you 5 days and you've already gotten under my skin in ways that could destroy me. Feelings mutual. That doesn't make it less dangerous. No, Elena agreed, but it makes it worth the risk. Mateo kissed her forehead, then stood. I need to make some calls. There's food in the kitchen, clean towels in the bathroom. Try to get some sleep. I'll be in the other room. He disappeared before she could respond, and Elena heard his voice speaking rapid Spanish through the closed door. She explored the apartment, small but well-maintained, clearly used occasionally but not lived in. The fridge held basics, the bathroom was stocked, the bedroom had fresh sheets. Someone maintained this place regularly, kept it ready for emergencies. Elena took a shower, changed into pajamas, and lay in the unfamiliar bed staring at the ceiling. Adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But sleep felt impossible. Every sound from the courtyard made her jump. Every time Mateo's voice rose in the other room, she tensed. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to someone sitting on the edge of the bed. Mateo, his face illuminated by the dim light from the hallway. Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. His voice was rough with exhaustion. What time is it? Almost 3. I just finished coordinating with my people. He ran a hand over his face. We have a lead on who sent the photo. Not confirmed yet, but promising. Elena sat up, suddenly alert. Who? A rival crew from the Roval. They've been pushing into Gothic Quarter territory for months, testing boundaries. Diego shut them down in the port, but they're looking for other leverage. Mateo's jaw was tight. They must have had someone watching me, saw us together, decided you were worth exploring as pressure point. What does that mean? It means they think taking you would force me to make concessions, give up territory, cut deals that favor them, destabilize my position. He looked at her. It means you were right to be scared. What are you going to do? Handle it. But it's going to take a few days to arrange properly. In the meantime, you stay here. No leaving the apartment, no contacting anyone. No posting on social media. Complete blackout. Elena's stomach sank. I can't just disappear. My family will worry if I don't check in. Send them a message tomorrow. Say you're exploring somewhere remote, limited internet. Keep it vague. Mateo's voice was firm. I know it's not ideal, but it's necessary. These people are serious, Elena. They don't make empty threats. And you're going to what? Negotiate with them? Fight them? What exactly does handle it mean? It means I do what I've been trained to do since I was old enough to understand what my father's business actually was. His eyes were hard. I remind them why challenging me is a bad idea. The coldness in his voice sent a chill down Elena's spine. This was the other Mateo, the one who ran criminal operations and made hard choices, the one she'd only glimpsed in fragments until now. Will you hurt them? Does it matter? Yes, it matters to me. Elena grabbed his hand. I need to know what you're capable of, what you're willing to do. Mateo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said slowly, I've hurt people. Broken bones, drawn blood, made examples when necessary. I don't enjoy it, but I don't shy away from it either. That's the world I live in. Violence isn't always the first option, but it's always on the table. Have you killed anyone? The question hung between them in the dark room. Elena half wanted to take it back, not sure she was ready for the answer. But Matteo had promised honesty. No. I've come close, but no. He met her eyes. That's a line I haven't crossed, but I can't promise I never will. If it came down to protecting someone I cared about versus someone trying to hurt them, I know which choice I'd make. Elena processed this, trying to reconcile the man who'd kissed her so gently hours ago with the one now talking about violence as business strategy. They were the same person. That was the truth she had to accept. Matteo contained multitudes, and not all of them were comfortable or safe. I don't know how to feel about this, she admitted. You should feel scared. Disgusted, maybe. Smart people run from men like me. And yet I'm still here. Yes. Something that might have been admiration flickered in his eyes. You are. He started to stand, but Elena caught his wrist. Stay, please. I don't want to be alone right now. Matteo hesitated, clearly weighing the implications. Then he kicked off his shoes and lay down beside her, on top of the covers, maintaining careful distance. Elena shifted closer, resting her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, strong, real. This is going to get worse before it gets better, Matteo said quietly. Once I move against the Raval crew, there will be retaliation, escalation. It's how these things work. Can't you just walk away from all of it? Not without consequences that would ripple through the entire organization. People depend on me. Families who've been with my father's network for decades. If I walk away, what happens to them? They find other work, other leaders. People are resilient. Some would. Others would end up working for worse people or on the street or dead. My father built this knowing exactly how to make it impossible for me to just quit. Bitterness edged his voice. He trapped me perfectly. Elena tilted her head to look at him. What did you want to be before all this? An architect. I studied it in university, was actually good at it. Had a job lined up in London with a firm that did sustainable design. His voice went distant with memory. I was going to build things that made cities better, helped people live in ways that didn't destroy the planet. Naive, probably, but it mattered to me. That's not naive. That's beautiful. It's irrelevant now. But his arm had tightened around her. That person died when my father did. I had to become someone else to survive. Or maybe he's just buried. Maybe you could find him again. You're an optimist. Someone has to be. Elena yawned, exhaustion finally catching up. Promise me something. What? When this is over, when the threat's handled and things calm down, take me to see a building you wish you'd designed. Show me what architect Matteo would have created. Elena. Promise. He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so softly she almost missed it. I promise. Elena fell asleep to the rhythm of his breathing, feeling safer than she had any right to feel given the circumstances. Her last conscious thought was that this, lying in the dark with a man who was both dangerous and gentle, both trapped and protective, this was the most honest thing she'd felt in years. She woke alone to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The photo, the safe house, Matteo's confession about who he was and what he'd done. Elena found him in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, speaking Spanish while he made espresso with the kind of focus usually reserved for surgery. He glanced up when she entered, held up one finger asking for a minute, then ended his call. Morning, sleep okay? Better than expected. Elena accepted the coffee he handed her. Any news? We've confirmed it's the Raval crew. 3 men, led by someone named Javier Ruiz. Small operation, but ambitious. They've been making noise for months. Matteo's expression was grim. I'm meeting with them this afternoon. Is that safe? Probably not, but it's necessary. He leaned against the counter. They want to negotiate. Think they can use you as leverage to get concessions. I'm going to explain why that's not going to work. By threatening them back. By making very clear what happens if they touch you. No apology in his voice, just flat certainty. This is how it works, Elena. Show weakness and you invite attacks. Show strength and most people back down. And if they don't back down, then things escalate until someone yields or someone gets hurt enough to stop. He said it like he was discussing the weather. I'm hoping for the former, prepared for the latter. Elena set down her coffee, appetite gone. I hate this. I hate that my existence is now a bargaining chip in some power struggle I don't understand. I know. I'm sorry. Matteo moved closer, careful not to crowd her. If I could take it back, make it so we never met, keep you safe from all this. I wouldn't want you to. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. I'm scared and this is insane, but I don't regret meeting you. Any of it. You should. Stop telling me what I should feel. Elena stepped into his space, forcing him to look at her. I'm an adult making choices with full awareness of the risks. Stop trying to take that agency away by shouldering all the guilt. Matteo's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. You're stubborn. You're just figuring this out? No, but I'm appreciating it more each day. He kissed her forehead. I need to leave soon. Carlos will be here in an hour to stay with you while I'm gone. Don't give him a hard time. How long will you be? Few hours at most. If something goes wrong... He stopped, reconsidered. Nothing's going to go wrong. But if you don't hear from me by 6, Carlos has instructions. What kind of instructions? The kind that gets you out of Barcelona safely. Matteo cupped her face. But it won't come to that. I've been doing this for 5 years. I know how to handle territorial disputes. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. No, I suppose it's not. He kissed her, and Elena tasted desperation underneath the tenderness, like he was trying to memorize the moment in case it was the last. Stay safe, stay hidden. I'll be back before you know it. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in the safe house with nothing to do but wait and worry. Carlos arrived exactly on time, all business and minimal conversation. He positioned himself by the window with clear sight lines to the street, phone in hand, completely focused. Elena tried to read, to work on blog posts, to do anything that would distract from the clock crawling towards 6. Nothing worked. At 4:30, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Every muscle in Elena's body tensed. Carlos? She held up the phone. He was at her side instantly, looking at the screen. His face went hard. Don't answer. Give it to me. But Elena had already opened the message. A video file already downloading. She pressed play before Carlos could stop her. The footage was grainy, clearly shot on a phone from a distance. It showed Matteo entering a warehouse, 2 men flanking him. The timestamp said 30 minutes ago. Then the camera angle changed, showed the interior of the warehouse. 4 men waiting, not 3. 4. And one of them was Diego Vargas. Elena's blood turned to ice. He set him up. Diego set him up. Carlos was already making calls, speaking urgent Spanish. Elena couldn't understand the words but caught the tone. Alarm, anger, mobilization. He hung up and looked at her. I need to go help him. You stay here, lock the door, don't open it for anyone except me or Matteo. Understand? I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Carlos, please. No. His voice was firm. Matteo would kill me if I brought you anywhere near this. You stay here. That's not negotiable. He was out the door before she could argue further, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts and the video playing on loop in her mind. Matteo walking into a trap. Diego's involvement. 4 men instead of 3. Elena paced the apartment, phone clutched in her hand, every second feeling like an hour. She should call someone, the police, and tell them what? That criminals were having a territorial dispute? They'd laugh or arrest her or both. Matteo's people were already mobilizing. There was nothing she could do except wait and hope Carlos reached him in time. At 5:15, the apartment door burst open. Elena's scream died in her throat when she saw who it was. Not Carlos, not Matteo. 2 men she'd never seen before, moving with professional efficiency. One grabbed her while the other swept the apartment, checking for threats. Don't scream, don't fight, come quietly, and you don't get hurt. The man holding her spoke English with a thick accent. We're leaving now. Where's Matteo? Elena struggled against his grip. What did you do? Matteo is occupied. You're coming with us. Insurance, yes? To make sure he stays cooperative. They pulled her toward the door, and Elena's survival instincts finally kicked in. She drove her heel into the first man's instep, exactly like the self-defense class had taught her. He swore, his grip loosening just enough. She twisted, broke free, ran for the bedroom. Didn't make it 3 steps before arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her off the ground. She screamed, kicked, fought with everything she had. A hand clamped over her mouth. Enough. We don't want to hurt you, but we will if necessary. Something sharp pricked her neck. Elena's vision blurred, her limbs going heavy. She tried to fight the drowsiness, tried to stay conscious, but darkness was pulling her under. Her last thought before everything went black was that Mateo had been right. She should have left Barcelona when she had the chance. Elena woke to the sound of dripping water and the smell of mildew. Her head throbbed, her mouth tasted like metal, and her hands were zip-tied behind her back. She was sitting on a concrete floor in what looked like a basement, dim light filtering through a small window near the ceiling. Panic hit like a physical blow. She was alone, restrained, in an unknown location with no idea how long she'd been unconscious or where her phone was or if anyone even knew she'd been taken. She's awake. Elena's head snapped toward the voice. A man stepped out of the shadows, young, maybe 30, with a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. He crouched down to her level. "Welcome back, Miss Martinez. I'm Javier. We're going to be spending some time together while we wait for your boyfriend to make the right choices." "Where's Mateo?" Elena's voice came out hoarse. "What did you do to him?" "Nothing yet. He's alive, probably very angry, definitely looking for you." Javier smiled without warmth. "That's the point. Mateo thinks he's untouchable, that he can control the Gothic Quarter forever. We're teaching him different, showing him that everyone has weaknesses. Everyone has something they care about more than territory." "You're using me to blackmail him." "Such an ugly word. I prefer strategic negotiation." Javier stood. "Mateo will give us what we want, access to 3 distribution points in the Gothic Quarter, and you go free. Simple business transaction." "He'll kill you for this." "Maybe. But first he'll negotiate, and that's all we need. Once we have those distribution points, we have legitimacy. Other crews will take us seriously. Mateo's control starts to crack." Javier moved toward the door. "Make yourself comfortable. This might take a while." He left, and Elena heard a lock click. She was alone in the dim basement, zip-tied and terrified, with no way to escape and no idea if rescue was even coming. But one thought cut through the panic. Mateo had promised to protect her, had promised that anyone who tried to use her against him would regret it. She had to believe he'd find a way, had to believe the man who'd saved her in an alley could save her again. Hours passed. Maybe. Time felt elastic in the basement, stretching and contracting. Elena worked at the zip ties until her wrists bled, but they didn't budge. She tried the door, locked from the outside. The window was too small and too high to reach. She was trapped. Footsteps on stairs. The door opened. Javier again, this time with a phone. "Your boyfriend wants to talk to you. Prove you're alive, prove you're unharmed. Then we can get back to business." He held the phone to her ear. "Elena?" Mateo's voice was raw. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay. Scared, but okay." She tried to keep her voice steady. "Don't give them what they want. Don't let them—" Javier pulled the phone away. "See? Alive. Unharmed. For now. You have 6 hours, Mateo. 6 hours to agree to our terms, or we start getting creative about what unharmed means." He ended the call, pocketed the phone. He sounded upset. Good. Upset people make mistakes. You don't know him. Elena's voice was stronger than she felt. He doesn't make mistakes. And he doesn't forgive. Everyone makes mistakes when someone they love is in danger. Javier smiled. That's what makes this so effective. He left again, and Elena was alone with 6 hours on a countdown she couldn't see. 6 hours until Mateo had to choose between her and his control. Between her safety and everything he'd spent 5 years building. She had to believe he'd find another option, had to believe the man who'd promised to protect her wouldn't let it come down to that impossible choice. She had to believe in rescue, because the alternative was unthinkable. Elena lost track of time in the basement. Could have been 3 hours or 5. No way to tell in the unchanging dim light. Her wrists had gone numb from the zip ties. Her back ached from sitting on concrete, and fear had settled into a cold, constant weight in her chest. The door opened again. Javier, but this time his expression was different, tense, almost nervous. Change of plans. We're moving you. Why? Because your boyfriend is insane, that's why. Javier pulled her roughly to her feet. He just delivered Diego Vargas to the police with enough evidence to put him away for 20 years. Burned an alliance that took him years to build, all because Diego helped set up the meeting where we grabbed you. Elena's heart lurched. Mateo had sacrificed Diego, had torched a major business relationship. For her. He's coming for you, isn't he?
He's already here. Bought off half my crew, surrounded the building, and gave me one chance to walk away alive. Javier's hand shook slightly as he cut her zip ties. So that's what I'm doing. Walking away. You're not worth dying over.
He pulled her up the stairs, through a warehouse that looked abandoned, toward a loading dock. Elena's legs barely worked, circulation returning in painful pins and needles. Outside, darkness had fallen. How long had she been unconscious? How long in that basement? A black SUV waited, engine running. Javier shoved Elena toward it. She's yours. Tell Mateo we're leaving Barcelona. Tell him the Gothic Quarter is his. Tell him yourself. The voice came from behind them. Elena spun to see Mateo emerging from the shadows, flanked by Carlos and 3 other men. He looked like he'd aged a decade in hours, disheveled, exhausted, and radiating cold fury. Javier's hand went to his waistband, toward a gun Elena hadn't noticed. Don't. Mateo's voice was ice. You pull that weapon and you're dead before it clears leather. Put your hands where I can see them. We had a deal. She for territory. You kidnapped her, drugged her, locked her in a basement. Mateo moved closer, and even from a distance, Elena could see the violence barely contained in his posture. There's no deal. There's only you deciding whether you leave Barcelona breathing or in a body bag. Javier's face went pale. He released Elena so abruptly she stumbled, and Carlos caught her before she fell. Then Javier was backing toward his SUV, hands raised. I'm going. We're going. You'll never see us again. You have 12 hours to be out of the city. If I see you, if I hear you're still in Barcelona after noon tomorrow, I'll finish what I started here. Mateo's voice was absolute. Run, Javier, and don't ever make the mistake of thinking you can touch what's mine again. Javier scrambled into the SUV, and it peeled away into the night. Mateo stood frozen, watching until the taillights disappeared. Then he turned to Elena, and the carefully controlled mask shattered. Are you hurt? His hands hovered over her like he was afraid to touch her. Did they hurt you? I'm okay, shaken, but okay. Elena was trembling now, adrenaline and relief and delayed shock all hitting at once. You came. Of course I came. Did you think I wouldn't? He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I burned everything, Elena. Diego, half my alliances, years of careful positioning, all of it, because none of it matters if you're not safe. The magnitude of that confession made Elena's knees weak. Mateo, I chose you, over territory, over control, over everything my father built. I chose you. His voice cracked. And I'd do it again. I'd burn it all again without hesitation. Carlos cleared his throat. We should move. This location isn't secure. Mateo nodded, keeping one arm around Elena as they walked to his car. She let him guide her, too exhausted to do anything but lean into his strength. They drove in silence through Barcelona's streets, and Elena watched the city pass by like something from a dream. Was this real? Had she really been kidnapped, threatened, rescued? The whole week felt impossible. They ended up at a different apartment, this one in the Example district. Nicer than the safe house, clearly Mateo's actual residence. He settled Elena on the couch, brought her water and blanket, checked her wrists where the zip ties had cut into skin. I should take you to a hospital, he said, examining the raw marks. I'm fine, just tired. Elena caught his hand. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next. But his voice was heavy with something that sounded like resignation. What does that mean? Mateo sat beside her, not meeting her eyes. I made a choice tonight. Chose you over my organization, over maintaining control. And that choice has consequences. People are already questioning my leadership, wondering if I've gone soft. Diego's arrest sent shockwaves through every crew in the city. Javier running proves I'm willing to destroy entire operations over personal matters. You saved my life. I proved I'm compromised. That's different. He finally looked at her. I can't protect you and run this organization effectively. Can't make rational decisions when you're the variable I'm trying to protect. Every rival now knows that threatening you is the fastest way to control me. Elena's stomach dropped. You're saying I have to leave? I'm saying we can't keep doing this. Not here, not like this. Mateo's voice was rough with emotion. I won't trap you in my world, Elena. Won't make you live in safe houses and look over your shoulder and wonder if every stranger is a threat. You deserve better than that. What if I don't want better? What if I want you?
Then you're not thinking clearly. But his hand tightened on hers. You've been in Barcelona for a week, 1 week, and you've already been attacked twice, threatened, kidnapped. How long before something worse happens? How long before I can't get there in time? So that's it? You're just deciding for me that this is over.
I'm deciding that I love you too much to destroy you. The words hung in the air, raw and honest. And yes, I know that's fast and probably insane, but it's true. I fell for you the moment I saw you trying to negotiate with men who were going to hurt you. This brave, stubborn woman who should have been terrified but was trying to reason her way out. And I've been falling harder every day since. Tears burned Elena's eyes. Then fight for this. Fight for us. I am fighting by letting you go. Mateo stood, pacing to the window. Tomorrow, I'm putting you on a plane. First class to wherever you want. Money to help you restart. Security detail to make sure you get there safely. And then I'm going to rebuild what I burned tonight. Stabilize the organization, make sure no one ever has reason to use you against me again. And what about us? What happens to us? We become a beautiful week in Barcelona. A story you tell someday about the time you met a man who wasn't good enough for you but cared enough to let you go. His voice was breaking. You'll travel more, write more, find someone who can give you the life you deserve. Someone without blood on his hands and enemies waiting in shadows. Elena stood, anger cutting through her grief. Don't I get a say in this? Don't my feelings matter? Your feelings are exactly why I'm doing this. Because if I let you stay, if I'm selfish enough to keep you here, eventually something will happen that I can't fix. And I'll have to live with that, with knowing I destroyed you because I wanted you more than I wanted to protect you. You're protecting me by breaking my heart? I'm protecting you by making the hard choice, the right choice. Mateo turned to face her, and Elena saw tears on his face. Hate me if you need to. Be angry. But please, please get on that plane tomorrow and don't look back. Elena wanted to argue, to fight, to make him see that this was wrong. But exhaustion was pulling at her, and she could see the immovable certainty in his eyes. Mateo had made his decision. Nothing she said tonight would change it. I need to sleep, she said quietly. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Elena, tomorrow, Mateo. I can't do this right now. He showed her to a bedroom, left her with clothes and towels and everything she might need. Elena closed the door, collapsed on the bed, and let herself cry. For the week that had changed everything. For the man who'd saved her and was now pushing her away. For the future that had seemed possible just hours ago and now felt like smoke slipping through her fingers. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she hoped it had all been a nightmare. Then she saw her torn wrists, felt the ache in her muscles, and remembered. Mateo was in the kitchen when she emerged, looking like he hadn't slept at all. He'd made breakfast, eggs, bread, fruit, and poured her coffee without asking how she took it. He already knew. Of course he knew. Your flight leaves at 2, he said without preamble. I booked you to London. Figured you could decide from there where you want to go next. There's 20,000 euros in an account I set up. Should give you breathing room to figure things out. I don't want your money. Take it anyway. Please, let me do this one thing. They ate in heavy silence. Elena pushed food around her plate, appetite gone. This couldn't be how it ended. 1 week of intensity and connection and feeling more alive than she had in years, and now Mateo was putting her on a plane and cutting her loose. What will you do? She asked finally. After I'm gone, repair the damage, rebuild alliances, consolidate power so this never happens again. He stared at his coffee. Maybe start working on an exit strategy. You were right that I'm trapped here, but maybe I can start building a way out. Will take years, but maybe someday I can walk away without everything collapsing. Years. Minimum. Probably more. He looked up. I'm not asking you to wait, Elena. I'm not asking you for anything except that you go and be safe and live the life you were meant to live. What if the life I was meant to live includes you? Then the universe has a cruel sense of humor. His smile was sad. But we don't always get what we want. Sometimes we get what we need, even when it breaks us. Carlos arrived at noon to drive them to the airport. The ride passed in silence, Mateo holding Elena's hand like he was trying to memorize the feel of her skin. At the terminal, he walked her as far as security would allow. "This is it then," Elena said, hating how small her voice sounded. "This is it." Mateo cupped her face, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. Gentle and desperate and final. "Be safe. Be happy. Don't settle for less than extraordinary." "I found extraordinary. I'm leaving it in Barcelona. You'll find it again. Someone worthy of you." He stepped back, and Elena saw the effort it took him to let go. "Goodbye, Elena Martinez. Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to want something beyond survival." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd. Elena stood frozen, boarding pass crumpled in her hand, watching the space where he'd been. Everything in her screamed to run after him, to fight harder, to refuse to accept this ending. But Mateo had made his choice. And maybe he was right. Maybe loving someone sometimes meant letting them go. Elena boarded the plane, found her seat, and stared out the window as Barcelona fell away beneath her. Somewhere down there, Mateo was returning to his life of careful control and calculated violence. And she was flying toward what? More wandering, more searching, more trying to find meaning and movement? The man next to her tried to make conversation. Elena put in headphones, closed her eyes, and tried not to cry. London felt wrong. Too familiar from her earlier travels. Too full of memories of who she'd been before Barcelona. Elena lasted 3 days in a hostel before buying a train ticket to Edinburgh, then another to Dublin, then another to Amsterdam. Kept moving because staying still meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering Mateo's face when he'd said goodbye. She tried to write, opened her laptop in cafes and hostels and libraries, attempted to capture Barcelona in words. But every post about architecture or food or hidden neighborhoods eventually circled back to him, to the week that had rewired something fundamental in her chest. She ended up with dozens of drafts she couldn't publish, stories too personal to share. 2 months passed, then 3. Elena burned through her savings and the money Mateo had given her, finding work in an Amsterdam hostel to stretch her funds. She made friends, took photos, explored new cities, lived the life she'd thought she wanted, and felt hollow doing it, because something had changed in Barcelona. Not just meeting Mateo, but the whole experience of it, the intensity, the risk, the feeling of being truly seen by someone who understood what it meant to be trapped in the wrong life. Solo travel had been about escape before Barcelona. After, it felt like running. Elena was cleaning hostel rooms when her phone buzzed with an email. Unknown sender, subject line blank. She almost deleted it as spam. But something made her open it. The message was short. "I walked away. Come home. M." Below it, an address in Chicago, and a photo of a building, modern, clean lines, sustainable design visible even in the architectural rendering. A plaque beside the entrance read, "Reyes Sustainable Development." Elena stared at the screen, hands shaking. Mateo had done it, had somehow extracted himself from Barcelona, from his father's empire, from the life that had trapped him. And he was asking her to come home, not to Barcelona, to Chicago, to him. She quit her job that day, bought a plane ticket with the last of her money, flew to Chicago with nothing but a backpack and hope that felt equal parts terrifying and right. The address led to a converted loft in a neighborhood undergoing revitalization. Elena stood outside for 10 minutes, gathering courage. Then she knocked. Mateo opened the door, and Elena's heart stuttered. He looked different. Lighter somehow, despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes. Like he'd been carrying weight for so long that even setting it down hadn't erased the muscle memory of its burden. "You came," he said, voice rough with disbelief. "You asked." I wasn't sure, He stepped aside. "Come in. Please." The loft was sparse but beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, exposed brick and modern fixtures creating a space that felt both industrial and warm. Architectural drawings covered one wall, plans for buildings Elena didn't recognize. "How?" she asked, turning to face him. How did you get out? Spent 2 years dismantling everything. Sold off businesses piece by piece, paid people to take over territories, created enough distance that when I finally walked away, the structure held without me. Matteo moved to the windows, staring out at Chicago. It cost me everything I'd built, but it turned out everything I'd built wasn't worth very much compared to the possibility of this. This? A life where I'm not constantly calculating threats, where I can build things instead of protecting them, where maybe, if I'm very lucky, I get to see if you still feel the same way you did in Barcelona. Elena's throat tightened. You did this for me? I did this for us, for the possibility of us. He turned to face her. But I need you to understand I'm not the same man you met in that alley. 2 years of extraction, of cleaning up messes and cutting ties and building legitimate businesses, it changed me. I'm not dangerous anymore, but I'm also not entirely sure who I am without that identity. Then we'll figure it out together. Elena closed the distance between them. I've spent 2 years traveling, searching, trying to find whatever it was I thought I was chasing. Turns out what I was chasing found me in a Barcelona alley, saved my life, then broke my heart to keep me safe. Elena, I love you. I've loved you since you stood between me and men who wanted to hurt me. I loved you when you showed me hidden corners of Barcelona. I loved you when you made the impossible choice to let me go. And I love you now, standing in this loft, trying to build something new from the ruins of your old life. Matteo pulled her into his arms, and Elena felt him shaking. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He kissed her then, and it felt like coming home after years of wandering. This was what she'd been searching for, not places or experiences or perfect photographs. Connection. Someone who understood that running from your old life didn't mean you'd found your new one. They spent that night talking, filling in 2 years of gaps. Matteo explained how he'd built Rea's sustainable development from the legitimate pieces of his father's empire, how he was designing affordable housing with environmental considerations, how he worked with community organizations to revitalize neighborhoods without displacing residents. Taking everything his father had taught him about building power and redirecting it toward actually helping people. Elena told him about her travels, her writing, the way she'd kept moving because staying still meant admitting what she'd really wanted was standing in a Barcelona apartment telling her to leave for her own good. I was an idiot, Matteo said as dawn light started filtering through the windows, pushing you away like that. You were trying to protect me. It was stupid and paternalistic and broke my heart, but I understand why you did it. Doesn't make it less idiotic. No, Elena agreed, but you fixed it. You actually did the thing you said would take years, and you did it, and you found me again. That counts for something. They built a life in Chicago. Not perfect, not without complications. Matteo had nightmares sometimes, woke up calculating threats that no longer existed. Elena struggled to settle, kept feeling the pull of movement even when she was exactly where she wanted to be. They fought about it, worked through it, learned each other's damage and how to handle it without making it worse. Matteo's firm grew. Started with 1 building, then 5, then a dozen projects across the Midwest. Affordable housing designed with care, community centers that actually served communities, parks that turned empty lots into gathering spaces. He hired people from his old life when he could, gave Carlos a job in security, brought in others who wanted out but didn't know how to leave. Created legitimate paths for people who'd only known illegitimate ones. Elena found her voice as a writer, started a new blog. This one focused on urban revitalization and sustainable development. Told stories about cities changing, people building, communities forming. Her photos documented transformation, not just architectural, but human. The posts went viral. Publishers reached out. Within a year, she had a book deal. 3 years after that day in Matteo's loft, they stood on the roof of one of his buildings, a mixed-use development in a neighborhood that had been written off as beyond saving. Below them, the community garden his firm had funded was hosting a summer festival. Music drifted up, along with laughter and the smell of grilled food. You did this, Elena said, leaning into Matteo's side. You actually created something beautiful. We did this. Your articles about the project brought in funding we couldn't have gotten otherwise. He kissed the top of her head. Partner. In crime? In everything else. Elena laughed. It still startled her sometimes how light he'd become. How the man who'd once controlled criminal operations now spent his days designing buildings and fighting for zoning variances and arguing with city councils about green space requirements. The transformation had been real, complete. The Mateo who'd walked away from Barcelona barely resembled the Mateo standing beside her now. But the core was the same. That careful intensity, that protective instinct, that capacity for fierce loyalty. He'd just redirected it all toward building instead of protecting. "Do you miss it?" she asked quietly. "Barcelona, the power?" Mateo considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the clarity. In that world you always knew where you stood, who your enemies were, what the stakes were. This life is murkier, but no, I don't miss it. Not when the alternative is this. Standing on a roof in Chicago? Standing on a roof in Chicago with you, watching a community we helped build celebrate being alive. That's worth every dollar I burned, every alliance I destroyed, every piece of my father's empire I had to dismantle." He turned her to face him. "You were right that day at the fountain. I wasn't as dangerous as everyone thought. I was just trapped. And you showed me that traps can be escaped if you're willing to sacrifice everything to walk away. That's very profound for someone who once threatened to break a man's legs over a territory dispute." "I never actually broke anyone's legs. I just implied I might." "So much better." They stood there as the sun set, painting Chicago in shades of amber and rose, not unlike the Barcelona light that had pulled Elena into an alley 5 years ago. That one reckless decision to chase a photograph had led to everything. Terror and kidnapping and heartbreak, yes, but also love and transformation and finding what she'd been searching for all along. People talk about destiny like it's this grand plan, like the universe has everything figured out and we're just playing our parts. Elena didn't believe that. She believed in chaos and coincidence and the random collision of lives that had no business intersecting. She believed she could have died in that alley, or gotten on that plane to London and never seen Mateo again, or stayed in Barcelona and ended up as collateral damage in a power struggle she didn't understand. But she also believed in choices. In the moment Mateo chose to step into that alley instead of walking past, in her choice to stay when every rational thought screamed to leave, in his choice to dismantle an empire rather than live without the possibility of her, in her choice to get on a plane to Chicago with nothing but hope and an email. The thing about running from your old life is that eventually you have to stop running, have to turn around and face whatever you've been avoiding. For Elena, that meant admitting that perfect photographs and exotic locations were never going to fill the emptiness. For Mateo, it meant accepting that his father's empire was a cage dressed up as legacy. They'd both been searching for the same thing, a life that felt true instead of performed, a connection that demanded honesty instead of carefully maintained masks, a reason to stop running, and they'd found it in each other, in Barcelona's shadows and Chicago's light, in the space between who they'd been and who they were still becoming. Mateo proposed that night, with no ring and no plan and no grand gesture. Just a quiet question on a rooftop. "Will you keep choosing this? Choosing us? Even when it's complicated and messy and nothing like what either of us expected?" Elena said yes. Because sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming, the ones that scare you and challenge you and refuse to fit into neat categories, the ones that require you to be brave in ways you didn't know you needed. They married a year later in a small ceremony in that community garden, surrounded by people they'd helped, and people who'd helped them, and people who understood that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up for each other when things are hard, about choosing partnership over ego, about believing that who you are together is stronger than who you are apart. Elena kept writing. Mateo kept building. They fought and made up and learned how to navigate life as partners instead of individuals. They traveled sometimes, but always came back to Chicago. To the loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and architectural drawings on the walls, to the life they'd built from the ruins of their old ones. And sometimes, late at night when neither could sleep, they'd talk about Barcelona. About that week that changed everything. About the alley and the viewpoint and the warehouse where everything almost ended. They'd remember the fear and the intensity and the way it felt to find each other in the middle of chaos. But they never wished to go back. Because the truth is, sometimes you have to walk through darkness to find light. Sometimes you have to risk everything to gain what matters. Sometimes the worst decision you ever make, chasing a sunset into a dangerous alley, leads to the best thing that ever happened to you. 5 years after standing in a Barcelona alley with a knife to her throat, Elena Martinez stood in a Chicago apartment with her husband's arms around her, watching the city lights reflect off Lake Michigan. And she understood, finally, what she'd been searching for during all those years of solo travel. Not adventure, not escape, not even herself. Connection. Home. Someone who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. Mateo had given her all of that. And in return, she'd given him permission to become someone new, to leave behind his father's legacy and build his own, to choose creation over destruction, building over controlling, love over power. They'd saved each other. Not in the dramatic way of that first night, but in the quiet, daily way of choosing partnership over solitude. Of believing that broken people can heal if they're willing to do the work. And they were willing. Every single day, they chose each other. Chose the messy, complicated, beautiful life they'd built from the ashes of who they used to be. That, Elena thought as Mateo kissed her temple and pulled her closer, was what real love looked like. Not perfect, not easy, but absolutely, undeniably worth it.